Welcome to everyone who's logged in today. It is nice to see so many people could join us, not just from Minnesota in the Midwest, but from around the country. My name is Ivan Heiberg, and I'm the Honorary Consul General for Norway in Minnesota. And today we are very fortunate to have our good friend, Ambassador Kåre R with us today to speak on this very, very important topic. As most of you will know, Ambassador R was Norway's ambassador to the United States before he became ambassador to Israel in 2020. Our topic for this webinar is Norwegian security policy with a focus on the Middle East. The ambassador will touch on trends and geopolitical developments currently taking place in a fast-changing Middle East, as well as Iran's role in the region, the significance of the normalization agreements reached between Israel and several Arab countries. And he will also provide an update on where things stand in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. After the presentation, we will have time for questions. So please write your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will certainly try and get to them all. Also note that this webinar will be recorded and that the recording will be available on our website in the next few days. Before we begin, allow me to properly introduce the ambassador. And as I mentioned previously, Mr. Ols began his current role as Norway's ambassador to the State of Israel in September 2020. Prior to that, as I think most of us know, he served for 7 years from 2013 to 2020 as Norway's ambassador to the United States. And then he was also the ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, from 2008 until 2010. Ambassador Ols has also served in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs as political director and as director general at the Department for Security Policy and the High North. He was responsible for Norwegian security policy and Norway's strategic cooperation with European and transatlantic partners, including NATO, and Norway's participation in the international operations. With that, it's a true honor to have you back with us, Mr. Ambassador. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Thank you for that introduction, and also thanks to the Consulate General for inviting me, and to Britt and Ragnhild in particular. It's really an honor to be back, and it's like coming home after 18 months, and so I've really been looking forward to having this opportunity to speak about the situation in the Middle East and how I see it. I also see from the participant list that there are many friends among the audience, and I'm very happy about that. And I really would like to say that I'm very, very pleased to see that Gary Ganrud, our former Consul General, is among the participants, and also Don Haagensen. And both of them, they were very, very, very helpful in the years I was in the United States. And being back in the Midwest is now, today, it's really great. And I also heard that that the Norway House is sort of being enlarged, and I really want to congratulate all of you who is part of that important project. I must say I'm also very pleased to see that our Norwegian hockey player Mats Zuccarello is having a great time playing for Minnesota, and I think he has his best year ever as a hockey player in the National Hockey League. And so I'm following what's happening in the United States, both politically, but also when it comes to hockey and other sort of sports events. I also have to admit that even though I'm missing United States, I'm missing my friends, I'm missing the Midwest, that I'm having a great time in Israel. And as the United States, Israel and the Middle East is really a priority area for the Norwegian government, and I'm very pleased that I have this opportunity, as I said, to speak about the sort of the major developments in this region. But also to say that being Israel, I am among nice people. They are frank, they are direct, and they are friendly. And there is this mix of Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And even though they are only 9 million people, they are all very, very active. So the topic you have chosen, I think that's it's a timely one. A lot is happening, even though sort of everything is now overshadowed by the situation in Ukraine, the Russian invasion. But the Russian invasion is also having impact, not only on Europe and transatlantic relations, Europe, the United States, but indeed also in the Middle East. And I think I would like to sort of start out by saying that what I would like to talk about is really Norway's role in the Middle East. And so the first question can, of course, be why is the Middle East and North Africa so important to Norway? And the easiest answer to that is that the Middle East is very close to Europe. It's very close to Norway. It's close geographically. It's close historically, culturally, politically, and indeed also when it comes to economics and trade. So it's a region having impact on Norway, and which also gives the sort of the reason why Norway for many years has had and is having, and I would say a strong commitment to the region, and also a strong engagement politically, militarily during the Iraq War. And we still have a military presence in Iraq, not very big, but we are militarily there. And we are engaged in a lot of sort of political processes in order to try to sort of stabilize the situation in areas or in countries where there are conflicts and or crisis. And I will come back to that. So what is happening in the Middle East? I think that the general perception is that this is a region characterized by conflicts and wars. And this is, I would say, that is partly correct, but there is much more going on. First off, so if I think I would like to sort of to highlight 3, 4, 5 main development trends. First of all, of course, as I also already touched upon, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is having an impact all over the world, and also in this part of the world. But we also see that among the sort of the African, North African and Middle East countries, that they have different, they have positioned themselves differently when it comes to Russia. Some of them are more favorable to Russia, and others have aligned themselves behind international communities' strong condemnation of the Russian invasion, but at the same time also providing financial aid and also militarily aid to Ukraine. And we saw that some weeks ago in the United Nations, that the region is divided. We also see here that, as in the rest of the world, that the invasion also have significant, I would say, impact on the regional economy, but indeed also the global economy. And we see that when it comes to, for example, the prices on agricultural products, as for example wheat. And I saw that the IMF yesterday, their prognosis was that the food prices globally could increase with approximately 38%, and I mean that's an enormous, huge figure, and of course that will have a huge also an impact on all of us. Also to say that, as you know, this region, part of the region at least, is a huge provider of gas and oil to the global market, including to Europe and the United States. And we see now that there is an sort of demand or request from countries for example, UAE and Saudi Arabia to increase their productions. So far, their response, I would say, have been fairly non-committal, in the sense that they are linking this question about energy, or providing more energy, gas and oil to the markets, linking this to other political issues in their relations, particularly, I would say, with the United States. A fourth development trend in this region is what we have seen now for many years, and which I would characterize or describe as the reduced American US presence and engagement in the region. That started long before Biden, it started long before Trump, and it started even before, I think, also President Obama. But what is important is that when the United States is less engaged than what was the case some years ago, this is opening up a new space for others. And one of the new key players in this region the last couple of years, that is China. And China now is the #1 trading partner with most of the countries in the Middle East, but also the biggest foreign investor in this part of the world. But we also see that other countries are trying to to fill that space, and Russia has been actively seeking to fill that space. And I would say that happened before the invasion of Ukraine. But so it's difficult now to be, I think, too bombastic to say what will be Russia's role in this region in the coming years. But other countries also filling that space or looking for opportunities, I would say, to fill that space. That's Turkey, it's Iran, and it's also the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. And if you want, we can come back to that when we have the question and answer role part of this session. We also see, I think that's also very, very important, is that the European Union, they do not have a a unified position on where they want to make their priorities and how they want to be actively involved in the region, and that is of course also having an impact on the situation. Then I would say that and Consul General Eivind, he referred to that in his introductory remarks. One of the most significant developments in this part of the world the last couple of years, that has been Israel normalizing its relations to other countries, and other countries normalizing with Israel. So, and that is the United Arab Emirates, and it's Bahrain, it's Morocco, and it's Sudan. And what we are seeing now really is an incredible development in for example, people-to-people contact between Israel and these countries, which I referred to. And I was in Abu Dhabi, in the United Arab Emirates a couple of weeks ago. And when I was taking the elevator in the hotel, the people next to me, they were speaking Hebrew. So the Israelis, they are using this opportunity to get to know these countries better, but also these countries, these countries themselves, they are also visiting Israel. So I think that the people-to-people contact is indeed very, very important. But we also see that the same countries, they have a huge, for example, UAE and Israel, huge technology cooperation, and there is sort of they're working on high tech, they're working on innovation, they are working on, I said, people-to-people, but also tourism, cultural exchange, technology issues, and other issues. And I think that what we are witnessing now between these countries, I think that in a couple of years we will probably see, hopefully, that more countries also will normalize its relations with their relations with Israel. It's difficult to discuss when we are talking about foreign policy and how countries are positioning themselves. But I think that that a huge impact will be the day when Israel and Saudi Arabia, if they will be able to normalize their relations. And what is interesting is that they already have informal contacts in certain areas. But if that happens, that will be huge, a huge impact. Also, we know that there are informal, confidential, private dialogues between Israel and some of the sort of non-Arab countries, but Muslim countries, and among them some of, for example, I think Pakistan, but also Indonesia. So things are happening, and I think it's very, very important to be aware of what's going on. So that was sort of what as I see as the sort of the main sort of development trends in this region, and that it is, there are also others. So, but I think that what I would like to concentrate on now is really to say some sort of, also make the rest of my presentation to tell you about how I see sort of how Norway is what Norway is doing, and how Norway wants to sort of to try to make a difference in the region. And there are sort of different sort of things I think it's important. I would like to highlight. First of all, I would like to say that Norway, we have a strong diplomatic presence in the region, and to be a relatively small country, we have a presence many places, and the idea is, of course, that using this presence in order to sort of to build relations and to build networks and to try to be, as I said, helpful and engaged. And there is now sort of a priority from Norway and the government to strengthen, to continue to build and to strengthen relations with countries like Turkey, Egypt, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. So that's sort of on the political diplomatic front, and the Norwegian foreign minister, she was in Egypt, Israel, and the Palestinian just before for Christmas, and we had the King of Jordan. He was in Norway on a state visit just before for Easter. I mean, not Christmas, Easter. So that's the sort of the political sort of angle. There is also an important sort of part of Norway's foreign policy to try to sort of to stabilize what we call fragile states. How can we help people in these countries characterized by wars and conflict in improving their standard of living, and to provide them the kids with education and provide them with humanitarian assistance. And two of those countries are Libya and Syria, where we want really to actively engage and to try to alleviate the situation for the civilian population. And I would say that we are able to do that. Norway is able to do that. And as Obama used to say, we are punching above our weight, and we will continue to do that. And I think that Norway was one of the biggest humanitarian contributors to Syria last year, and that will also be the situation this year. And as I said, humanitarian assistance to Syria and Yemen. We are also, and in these countries, there are many what we call internally displaced refugees or persons, and we are also really trying to alleviate their situation and to improve their living standard. And that is also, I would say, part of sort of the Norwegian policy tradition for many years. Another important sort of priority for Norway is to what I would call is to fight radicalization and extremism. And you know, you remember you saw this during this IS when they tried to sort of dominate part of the Middle East and the ISIS coalition, which is still working. Norway is a part of that, and so to sort of to try to contribute in that international effort. That's part of what Norway is doing, and which we will also continue to do that. There's another, and that is, I would say, fairly new priority area, and that is what I would call the sort of the green technology and the sort of the transition from a fuel-based economy into greener and bluer economy. And some of you will remember that was also one of the things I talked a lot about when I was the ambassador to the United States. But that is also now an important part of sort of Norway's global engagement on green technology. And we are working closely with Saudi Arabia in this area, and we are also doing that with Morocco. And we are also having some sort of joint projects between sort of Norway financially supporting sort of a green or environmental climate cooperation between Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinians. And so we are also here actively involved in that development. And that is, of course, as you know, very, very much related to sort of what the international community jointly is doing to sort of to fight climate changes and to sort of to improve the climate and to reduce the emissions. And that is, so I say, many of our embassies in this region working on that. Also what we are doing, we are trying as best as we can also to sort of to see whether Norway can sort of be helpful in developing further what I call the sort of the normalization between Israel and these 4 or 5 countries to include more countries. And I think that and that is part, I would say, of a broader stabilization effort in the Middle East. If you are able to sort of stabilize the Middle East, I think that will have a huge impact also globally. And I told you about sort of Israel working on technology, tourism, culture with these countries, like for example the UAE. But there are also other areas I think that these countries and the region can work more closely together. And that is, for example, on water resources. Water in this region is very, very scarce, and they have to, as I see it, they have to sort of cooperate in order to sort of to provide water to all the citizens in this region. Also food security, and I touched upon that when I referred to Russia and Ukraine. I think there are huge opportunities to sort of for the countries to work together on food security. And one interesting area is fish harvesting on shore Norway is a champion offshore, but there is also now very much interest in what Norway is doing onshore, for example, in the state of Maine, in the state of Washington, and in Florida, where there are huge Norwegian investments in this technology. And that is something also Norway can, I think, also help these countries in achieving. At the same time, I'm sure that these countries could do more on sort of what I would call civil emergency, and also on green technology and blue technology, and that is coming. But I think that if we are able to sort of these countries to work together within these different areas, I'm sure that will over time also stabilize this region, and that is what is needed. Another priority area for Norway is what I would call non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and particularly then to avoid new countries to acquire military or a nuclear capability. And Iran is of course very much on the sort of the top of the international news these days. And Norway, we have for all the way been very supportive of the nuclear agreement between the United States, Iran, and the other European countries, including China and Russia. And we really hope that the sort of the negotiations taking place now in Vienna also will sort of will conclude with Iran and in the United States, and particularly the United States, going back to the agreement. Let me, I'm just looking at my watch because I got, I think, 20 to 25 minutes, and I have spoken in 22. So, but I would like really to also to say that the sort of I would probably say that the most important sort of policy priority for Norwegian governments for 3 decades, and perhaps also even before that, has been the sort of our strong and international leadership, I would say, in trying to sort of to build peace and to establish peace and to support the peace process between Israel and Palestine. We have, as some of you remember, probably most of you, we had the Oslo Peace Accord from 1993, and which was signed, I think it was the 13th of September, on the lawn in front of the White House. But what I would like to sort of to convey to you is that the peace process is now in a bad shape. There is no peace process any longer. Mainly related to, I would say, lack of political interests from both sides in negotiating, to say it sort of broadly, and also where we have a sort of and the present government in Israel, they have said that they are not going to touch this issue. And here in Israel, we have a coalition government of 8 political parties. And they have said that the Palestinian issue is not on their table for the time being. And we also have a situation where the Palestinian leadership is very, very divided. And we have a military fraction of the Palestinians, as you know, in Gaza, the Hamas. And so it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. And so the best sort of characteristic of the peace process, I would say, is that it is in coma. That does not mean that Norway is not sort of actively pursuing our goal in sort of supporting the peace process. And we have been doing that for many years. We are chairing the international donor community, trying to sort of reach with the aim of sort of providing financial support to the Palestinians through this mechanism. And the donor community, they will again meet in Brussels next month, chaired by and the meeting will be chaired by the Norwegian Foreign Minister, and the meeting will take place the 10th of May. The peace process, Israel-Palestine, very, very important to us, as it is for the rest of the international community. But we lack commitment, as I said, by the parties, and there also, I would say, is a reluctance by some key players internationally to push that issue forward. Let me end by saying that in Norway now, we have a new government since October, or was it October, and headed by the new prime minister. He was the former foreign minister for many years, and he's now the chair of the Labour Party, and he is now the prime minister. And we have also again a woman who's in charge of our foreign policy, and she was also chairing the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defense in the Parliament for the last 8 years. What I wanted to sort of end by saying is that the new government, they have sort of underlined in their political manifest that Norway is going to do more on sort of what I will call peace and reconciliation, trying to sort of to help countries in conflict and parties in conflict and countries in war to sort of solve and to stabilize and to sort of solve these wars politically, or the conflicts politically. And some of them, some of these conflicts, as I said initially, they are happening here in the Middle East and North Africa. And that is why Norway, for example, is taking a strong commitment, I would say, in trying to sort of to be helpful in Yemen. Very difficult, but we are trying, and we are allocating resources to that. We are actively supporting the UN Special Envoy to Syria in order to see whether we can be helpful there. And we have, as I said, this strong commitment on the Israel and the Palestinians. And we are also involved in some sort of other dialogues, which we are both sharing and supporting. Some of those are confidential, but I just wanted to leave you with that, to say that Norway, I would say we have a broad and comprehensive engagement to this region. We have that for many years. We are there politically, we are there economically, we are there militarily, as we are now in Iraq, and where we have been for many years. And we are also here, that's important also to say, we are also here, of course, in order to sort of to support Norwegian businesses and trade. And in some countries, that part of the sort of what the embassies are doing are very successful. And in others, there are more work to be done. So Eivind, with those remarks, I leave it to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions there would be. And if I can't answer them, then I pass it over to you, Eivind. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Appreciate that. And I think I'm going to probably leave it up to you to answer questions that have come in. But thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your remarks and insights. Very interesting, especially hearing your remarks about Israel normalizing relations with other countries, and also some of the high-tech development trends I found very interesting. So thank you for that. Also, I think the ambassador will find it interesting. I don't have the whole list in front of me, but I know our friends over at the Minnesota Trade Office, Gabrielle Gerbeau and Steve Riedel also is with us today, as well as my colleagues, Honorary Consul Ron McLean and Lisa Christensen are here as well. And I'm sure Mr. Ambassador wanted to know that as well. So now it's time to get into the Q&A segment, and it's not too late to ask a question. If you have a question, please, again, load those via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll certainly try and cover as many as we can. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleagues, Vice Consul Britt Ardakani, and also Consular Officer Ragnhild Hjeltnes, who will help facilitate questions for the ambassador. So Ragnhild, Britt, feel free to move forward with the first question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for the very interesting presentation. We have a couple of questions here. Norway's security policy's main objective is to safeguard Norway's sovereign territory, integrity, and political freedom. And you mentioned a strong diplomatic presence and state visitations, and also trying to stabilize fragile countries as some of the things that Norway is doing. In addition, are there any other ways Norway is working to safeguard good relation with the countries of the Middle East?
That was a very good question. So the easy answer to that is yes. No, but let me say that and I didn't mention that in my remarks. But I think that one important component in for example, what Norway has been doing in Israel and with the Palestinians for so many years is that it's and some of these other peace processes also. And as I even said, I was also the ambassador to Afghanistan back in the days. And so what is often happening is also that there is sort of the religious leaders, they also get together. So for example, there sort of you can have sort of having sort of a Norwegian Christian priest, for example, or a minister engaging with Muslims, Jews, and Christians in order to sort of try to sort of elaborate ideas on how people can be working peacefully together and respect each other's beliefs, but also political positions. And what is happening these days in Jerusalem, you have the sort of, as you know, you have the Ramadan, and you have the Passover, and you have the Easter, and where there has been a lot of difficult situations in East Jerusalem, where people have sort of been physically fighting each other, and also where this hatred has been expressed by some groups and individuals. As an example of sort of that also, I think that also religious groups can sort of also be helpful in this regard. And it's for sure that for example, Norway's relations with Israel, since the sort of the establishment of the foundation of the State of Israel, was both politically with the sort of the Norwegian trade union, the sort of the political parties, but also the Christian communities engaging very, very strongly with Israel and the different sort of sectors of the Israeli society. And that is indeed very, very important. So, but to the question, I would also like to say that I think that in any sort of what Norway is doing internationally is really to make a difference, but it's also because, as the one who posed that question said, it's also because it has to do with Norwegian own security and our own stability. So, for example, how in order to avoid conflicts and to help us solve crises and wars is of course an important part of that is of course that if we are able to help people where they live, they are not sort of running from their country as refugees, as we saw. You remember back for a couple of years ago, where there sort of was this huge influx of Syrian refugees and from other countries too. So that is what we are also trying to do, and together with the international community and together with the United Nations and others. Thank you.
Yeah. As you mentioned, you served as a Norway's ambassador to Afghanistan from 2008 to 2010. How has Norwegian security policy changed in that area from then to now?
Yeah, what has changed is, of course, that there was this decision by the international community to sort of sort of withdraw the military forces from Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover, and so the situation now in Afghanistan is totally different than from the 20 years where the United States, Norway, Europe, Canada, and many other countries were heavily involved in the country, both politically, economically, and militarily. What is happening now is that the Taliban is ruling the country. There is a lack of sort of, and it's the Taliban is not recognized by the international community. There is a lack of all the regime, all the sort of the country is sanctioned, which also means that the banks are closed and people closed, and there is no opportunity for people to sort of to get the savings from the banks out. The humanitarian catastrophe is really bad. And I think that the United Nations says that 95% of the population could be starving or is starving, which means that there is, I mean, it's a tremendous, it's tremendously important that the country, that there is possible to sort of access the country with humanitarian assistance. And it's happening as we speak, but not as much as we had hoped. But the sort of the whole the international aid development programs taking place there for so many years and with so much money has stopped for the time being. And so what is needed, what the Taliban needs to do is really to sort of to establish what we call a government of inclusive government, representing all the different sort of ethnic groups of Afghanistan, but also the civil society, and respecting women and girls' education. And the Taliban, they promised when they met in Oslo with Norway and the international community, back in, I think it was in January or December, I don't remember, that they were going to open the schools for girls the 23rd of March. They did not, you know. And I mean, it's that was a promise they gave to the international community. And it's very difficult for any country sort of to support a government not respecting what they are saying, but also sort of not allowing half of the world's country's population not going to school. So so that's where the situation in Afghanistan stands. It's very regrettable and very sorry for what's happening. We all are, but that's the situation.
Yeah. Is there anything Norway can do or other countries can do to help kind of push them to keep their promises?
Yeah, what we are doing, Britt, is really that Norway, together with some others, we are talking to Taliban, and Norway started to talk to Taliban long before anyone else did. And there are very few. There's no Western embassies any longer in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. They are all now sort of located to Qatar, Doha, and from time to time they are meeting Taliban officials or Afghan officials in Doha, trying to sort of to influence the way forward, and it will take time, but I think we will get there. I think so, but I mean, it will take time.
Yeah, we're hoping so. It's important to educate both the men and the women, or the boys and girls. Very important. So Norway used to have, or has had, armed forces in the Middle East through UN. Do we still have armed forces in the Middle East at this point, and if so, where?
Yeah, as I said, we have a small sort of military component in Iraq. Has been there for a long time. But I think also what the question also refers to is that back in the days, Norway was also participating in the UN operation in Lebanon, which is called UNIFIL, and that sort of that military over sort of that we withdrew from the sort of the UNIFIL many years ago, and I think it was. I think it was even in the 1990s sometimes in the 1990s, and but we have been there for many years in UNIFIL, but that decision was taken by the government at that time, and due to sort of need for those resources being allocated other places.
Okay. So how has the war, you talked a little bit about the war in Ukraine and how it's influenced, how has there been a big impact on the Norwegian security policy, this war in Ukraine?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it has, as it has been in the United States and all over the sort of Europe and Canada and most part of the world. We have, like other countries, we are providing military assistance to Ukraine. We are closely coordinating with NATO allies. The heads of state and government, they met in Brussels. The NATO heads of state and government, they met in Brussels some few days ago, discussing the way forward in Afghanistan, in how to help Ukraine.
Yeah.
NATO has decided to sort of to increase and to strengthen its military presence in the sort of eastern parts of NATO. Norway, I'm sure, will be part of that, and we are also, of course, also sanctioning the Russians, in line with sort of what the European Union has been the decision taken by the European Union. So we are aligned with Europe, and we are acting collectively together with other NATO countries.
So the Norway also provided air defense system to Ukraine. What is this? I mean, does this weaken our security? I mean, how does this influence our security?
Yeah, oh, good. I mean, these are all good questions. And so what the government has said, and what the Norwegian Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister and Defense Minister, what they all have said, is that we will be actively supporting Ukraine with military material, equipment, but at the same time, it's very important also to Norway to not weaken our own defense capabilities, and that balance is being done by the government, and that is happening. So that's the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. Does we in Norway share a relatively decent border with Russia. How does this war influence the Norwegians' relationship with Russia?
As I said, we have sort of sanctioned. We have posed sanctions on the Russian individuals. We have decided to sort of reduce our sort of political contacts with Russia. At the same time, it's important for Norway to sort of to continue to speak with the Russians on sort of, for example, fish resources in the Barents Sea. There is also an important to us also to sort of to have a dialogue with the Russians on everything related to sort of the sort of what we call sort of the climate issues, nuclear issues on the Kåre Peninsula, and we are doing that. It's important to maintain sort of and I think that's correct also to sort of to continue to talk to the Russians, but at the same time, as I said, with a very clear sort of signal messaging that sort of what the normal situation, the situation that the dialogues and the cooperation we had prior to the invasion of Ukraine is not any longer the situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm going to jump in here. I see there's a question that came in from Mr. Gary Gandred. He said, you mentioned Mats Zuccarello. His best collaborator is Kaprizov, a young Russian. My question, are young people, Palestinian, Russian, Israeli, tired of these conflicts, and is there hope that they won't follow the old ways?
Thank you, Gary. So good to hear from you through the mouth of Ragnhild. Sorry that I can't see you on the screen. I think that people are in general exhausted about this conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis and Palestinians. I think so. The sort of the mosaic in Israel is very interesting. There are 2 million Russian Jews in this country, and there is a huge amount of Ukrainian Jews in this country. and in Israel. I think it's 20% of the Israeli population, they are Arab Israelis. So the mosaic is very, 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 very sort of interesting and challenging, I would say. But what is interesting is, of course, that they are living in peace in Israel, with some sort of exceptions. For example, last spring in May last year, there were a lot of sort of some sort of clashes between the Israeli Jews and Arab Israelis in what we call this sort of the mixed cities. But I think that in Israel, there is I mean, the people I'm talking to, they are all of them are sort of, most of them are sort of underlining that the only solution to the present conflict is, of course, a two-state solution. It's one state for the Palestinians and one state for the Israelis. And then the question is, of course, where are the borders, and what will happen with Jerusalem? And there are UN resolutions saying that the sort of the Palestinian borders should be the 67 borders. And the 67, remember that was the 6 Days War, changing all the sort of that, and also with a clear sort of underlining by the international community that East Jerusalem should be the capital of the Palestinians. Those are the tricky issues. But I think, Gary, to your question, I think that, and I said that the political process is in coma, and I would say that I think that the one way forward here, and I forgot to say that, so thank you for your question, Gary, is that I think that one way forward here is that if Israel and these Arab countries, if they are able to sort of normalize their relations, if they're going to sort of have a normal relations, I think that in itself will create economic growth, it will create trade, it will create people-to-people contact between these countries, they will work on technology, they will work on many, many issues, water issues, as I said. I think, and that's how I see it, I think that if that happens, I think that could have a positive spillover on the Palestinian issue, and to sort of to move that forward. And the more sort of countries normalizing, Arab countries normalizing with Israel, they can also use that normalization in sort of emphasizing the need for a solution to the Palestinian issue. Because what we all know is that this is not sustainable. The situation we have now is not sustainable could be sustainable for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but it's not sustainable in the long run. It is not, it's going to one way or another, it's not going to, something needs to happen. And I think that there is a need now to sort of to look for other avenues in order to sort of to reach that goal, the international goal, the goal of the Palestinians and the goal of the Israelis of a two-state solution. And I think that goes through the normalization processes.
Okay, thank you for that. I had one more questions here that we got in advance. An essential part of Norway's security policy is to prevent and combat all forms of violent extremism and terrorism. And you touched on this earlier. How does Norway define terrorism, and what does that mean for how it views the Israel-Palestine conflict?
What we have internationally is, of course, that we have sort of the international community, United Nations has sort of named some organizations as terrorist organizations, and then there are sort of sanctions, and the international community through the sort of, for example, the IS coalition is fighting them, and we were able to do that, as you remember, some few years ago, but the IS is still very dominant many places, not many, at least in some places, so that's one part of the question. When it comes to sort of to the Palestinian-Israeli issue, I think that what we need to do in that conflict is really to sort of to look, as I already said, look for opportunities to move the process forward. But of course, Norway, we are condemning sort of terrorist attacks in Israel, like for example, when 2-3 weeks ago. I mean, there 14 Israelis were killed. Most of them, I think it was in the city of Tel Aviv. And we are also critical to sort of some of the sort of military police operations on the West Bank, and trying to sort of to underline the need to sort of moderate actions. But I mean, these are different sort of. It's very different to sort of what we are aiming at here is really to bring the parties together and move the things forward. And so it's the political part of this which is important to my government.
Thank you for that. There are no more questions on my end. I don't know, Britt, do you have anything else?
I have no more questions either. So, but thank you.
Sounds good.
We will have the last 5 minutes for questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. Some great questions, Mr. Ambassador. I just wanted to relay a comment you have that came through from Mette Bowen. She had no questions, but only greetings to the ambassador from the big fan base you have in Chicago. So wanted to share that.
Thank you.
With that, I also want to thank Max Stevenson and also Norway House for all the behind the scenes technical assistance and support that you provide, for the consulate and for our webinars. We really appreciate that. And again, I want to thank you, Ambassador Ols, for being with us again. It's truly an honor and great to have you with us. And thank you to all of you for tuning in and participating. Wonderful to have you with us today. And of course, we wish you a wonderful afternoon. And of course, a great evening to you, Ambassador Ols. And again, thank you, everybody. And we hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.